Jim and I spent a lot of time together this last week, as we were telling some people just earlier. It was about 1 in the morning on early Saturday morning in which we crossed paths for the last time after we had voted on the continuing resolution. And, at least we gained something from this last week. For essentially the last 3 years, we've been conducting an ongoing investigation to try to figure out who collapsed this economy, who was responsible for the hundreds of thousands of foreclosures, for half of the value being sucked out of our 401ks, for billions of taxpayer dollars having to go to save a handful of big banks. And this week, the Republicans told us it was Sesame Street. It is pretty amazing. The politics that are happening in Washington right now today. When you saw the Tea Party holding a rally outside of the Capitol this Thursday, I believe, the chant that they repeated over and over again was "shut it down, shut it down, shut it down." And the mistake the press made was to believe that that was about a temporary government shutdown. It wasn't. I mean, they were essentially calling for the wholesale permanent shutdown of the federal government. What we are engaged in right now is, I think, as Jim mentioned, at some level, a very unserious discussion about the periphery of U.S. government. But there is a much more foundational argument here about whether government can play a role for positive good in people's lives, whether there is a long-term ability for all of us to come together as a community and essentially create our values within a system of public governance. And I think that's a fight worth having. I think often Democrats kind of cower at the notion of defending government. The idea that we should pool our resources at times to lift up our neighbor when they get hurt or when they need a helping hand. And so I frankly look forward to this fight. And I think why you have seen the discussion turn in some places like Wisconsin, in some state capitals around the country, is that we got a spine when they came after some of the just basic notions of fairness and democracy. And I'm somewhat optimistic about what can happen through the discussion of the Ryan budget, which is as backwards as it is disingenuous. I'm confident that if we take the Republicans on this ridiculous notion of withdrawing money from whether it be public broadcasting or Planned Parenthood as a means of trying to balance our budget, that we can win those fights. But why I'm excited to be here is that the way that we do that is to invest in what we do best as a party, and that's grassroots organizing. I want to tell you why SNAPPAC is so important to me, and why it's in some way a part of my core as a public official. When I was running the first time, I wasn't in very different circumstances than Jim. I was a long-shot candidate in 2005 running against Nancy Johnson, someone who at the time was the longest-serving member of Congress in Connecticut's history. No one gave me a shot to even come close to her. I was a first-time candidate for Congress. And one of the first phone calls I got when I had a staff of one was from an organization at the time that I'd never heard of, SNAPPAC, who told me that they wanted to triple the number of staff that I had and send me 2 interns for the spring and the summer. And I can't really express to you in words what that meant to me. Not just that we additionally had 2 amazing students, Sean Crotty and Giovanna Frank Vital, who are still close friends today, who were able to just greatly expand the scope of our operation. But the fact that somebody believed in us, the fact that a national organization, even though it was in our backyard at the time, was willing to say, you know what, this is a race worth taking a chance in. What it did for the morale of me and the morale of our volunteers is something that I frankly can't calculate.